It's high noon, and 6 uppity raiders think they just got the drop on you. Your eyes record every detail. The scabbed skin, the bloodshot eyes, the nervous twitches. Your arm is ready to snap to your iron the second you see a trigger finger budge. You warn them, but they just don't listen. What's going on? My name is Michael and welcome back to Fudge Muppet. If you haven't noticed, we've returned with Fallout 4 builds after a hiatus of many years, and it feels good to be back in the wasteland. Today we have a remastered build, a completely reworked version of the Gunslinger, optimized and enhanced, considering the changes that the DLC has brought to the table in terms of gear and perks. Plus, there are just some tweaks we would prefer considering our heightened build-making experience that was refined after the original's release. The original Gunslinger build released January 5th, 2016, 8 years ago, so I think it is more than due for a facelift. But don't worry, we are going to stay true to the essence of the original build, while bringing it up to the quality standards of today. The Gunslinger has a big iron on his hip and he never misses. This is an amazing VATS and critical-centric playstyle, utilizing amazing perks such as Gun Fu, Critical Banker, and Concentrated Fire, so you are able to pull off endless cinematic kills with plentiful access to crits, which are always 100% accurate. The feeling we want to capture is that of a hero in some spaghetti western or something like Tarantino's Django, pulling off crazy kill counts with amazing accuracy. So if you're looking for a pistol-spinning, bullseye-shooting, action-packed western-themed build who seeks to bring justice to the wasteland one well-placed bullet at a time, then sit back, relax, and get ready to learn all about the Gunslinger. Timestamps will be included for every section, covering backstory, role-playing, character creation, a complete list for leveling and perks, weapons, and gear for early, mid, and late game, as well as a final wrap-up in the last section, which summarizes how the character stats, gear, and weapon choices all coalesce into a sensational playstyle. But with all that said, let us begin with the backstory. The Gunslinger's name is Louis Toadvine. He was a first-generation city kid who grew up in Boston, but his father came from a family of tobacco farmers back Kentucky way, where his grandparents, uncles, and cousins still lived. Louis may have spent the bulk of his childhood in suburbia, but many holidays were spent back at the family farm amongst his cousins, and it was here he got into all kinds of childish troubles, every kind of mischief you can imagine, and every time, by the grace of God or sheer dumb luck, he would survive all manner of potential accident. To call him serendipity incarnate would be an understatement. Every horsefall had a hay bale landing, every slipped step had a wooden post to grab, every foiled prank had a fortunate escape. And to give credit where it was due, the boy was quick, with limbs like whipcords, and it was thanks to such agility that he was able to cash in on that bountiful luck. His school life back in the city was rather unproductive, full of fights and misdemeanors. He only ever felt at home back with his cousins in Kentucky. He always looked up to Waylon, his eldest cousin, 6 years his senior. He taught Louis to shoot at the age of 10, blowing beer bottles off fences, and when Waylon realized he had a prodigy on his hands, he pushed him to enter competitions. Louis got good, real good. By the age of 15, he had all manner of trick shots under his belt and took first place at several state shooting competitions. This was when the Gunslinger truly came into his own. Even back home in Boston, school life started to look up for him, not for academic reasons, but simply because Nora was there. Under the guise of tutoring, the two began spending time together, and in quick time they were high school sweethearts, an iconic himbo guy and bookworm girl couple. Nora had high aspirations to go to law school, but the Gunslinger's aspirations weren't so lofty, rather they were far more sentimental. His cousin Waylon had joined the military and fought in the Sino-American War, and he encouraged Louis to sign up for the military as soon as he finished school, saying, "America needs a good aim like yours." Louis wanted to follow in his footsteps, and so he signed up, experienced his first deployment, and became a valuable infantryman. Upon his first return, he proposed to Nora, and the two were married on the family farm back in Kentucky. Louis would be deployed again for several months, and when he returned, his son Sean would be born. They were a happy family, set up in Sanctuary Hills, but then the bombs fell and everything changed. When the gunslinger emerges from the vault, he will be distraught. He was a family man, and now his wife, his cousins, his parents, everyone has been taken from him, including his son, Sean. The gunslinger is going to have a hard time acclimating to this new barren landscape, but he will quickly find his way to Sanctuary and then to Concord, where he will rescue the Minutemen and link up with Preston Garvey back at Sanctuary. He becomes convinced of the cause of the Minutemen and will seek to help the settlements of the Commonwealth. Specifically, I actually like using Abernathy Farm as my home base for this character because it reminds him somewhat of his family farm back in Kentucky, and he relates well to the salt of the earth people like Mr. Abernathy. At his core, the gunslinger believes in those iconic Western frontier ideals of freedom and self-determination, but not in some kind of self-serving way, rather in an idealistic need to preserve human dignity. Hence he finds himself dramatically opposed to all groups that would enforce control through dogma or force. That means raider gangs, highwaymen, slavers, institute manipulators, Brotherhood of Steel bullies, and anyone else who would abuse their power. In a way, the gunslinger is a chaotic force for good, entering new towns and taking out the trash, coming upon those in trouble, and by mere circumstance and an intense desire for justice, he ends up helping them, leaving a trail of good deeds in his wake as he journeys the wasteland. For the gunslinger, we really want to hone in on that experience of being a wasteland legend, wandering from place to place, finding his way into the mythic stories of those he has helped. I like to think that people spread rumors of the gunslinger as if he is some renowned vigilante. Throughout the course of the main quest, certain revelations will be had and certain choices will have to be made, namely which faction to help bring order to the Commonwealth. Now, I think there are two main options that make sense for the gunslinger, and the good thing is that neither of these factions are opposed to one another. They are the Minutemen and the Railroad, and it is really up to you to decide who you want to complete the main quest with. However, I will say, if you do complete it with the Railroad, it will involve being directly opposed to the Brotherhood of Steel, which from a role-playing perspective is perfectly in line with this character. However, if for whatever reason you would rather have the Brotherhood of Steel as a persistent presence in the wasteland, even if just because it makes the Commonwealth more interesting, then perhaps finish the main quest with the Minutemen. Either way, you will want to join and help out the Railroad earlier on in your playthrough to gain access to the Ballistic Weave modification, and also their quest for liberation of synths is a reasonable course to the gunslinger, though it hinges on the idea that he can come to see synths as human, and therefore affording them the dignity owed, and personally I think this kind of ideological development can make sense for him. It goes without saying, I think, that in the Nuka World DLC, helping the Raiders is a big no-no, and same goes for helping the Children of Atom in Far Harbor, and as a general note, I don't think he would approve of behind-the-scenes meddling and manipulation either. They are all things to consider for the DLC. As for companions, I think one of the best fits for the early game is Preston Garvey. We will be joining the Minutemen and helping them restore order to the Commonwealth, and his perk, United We Stand, gives you 20 more damage resistance and 20% more damage when outnumbered. And in gameplay terms, that means 3 or more enemies, which happens a lot of the time. Another option is McCready, a sharpshooter type character whose perk Killshot gives the player a 20% greater chance to hit an enemy's head in VATS, which is helpful earlier on when we don't have as many criticals and no concentrated fire perk. But towards the end of the mid-game, more specifically levels 34 and 35, we will be taking Lone Wanderer and disregarding companions entirely, with the golden exception of Dogmeat, a much quieter friend with less opinions and requests for settlements that need your help. I'll expand more on the specifics in the leveling section. Okay, let's talk more about the gameplay specifics of character creation. The starting special stats for this character are 1 strength, 4 perception, 1 endurance, 1 charisma, 1 intelligence, 10 agility, and 10 luck. This build is 100% optimized for the vocation of its namesake, and it is very much a min-maxed build, crafted to get you the most out of a gunslinger experience. We will make some additional stat adjustments later higher with special point investment, but this is mainly for the purpose of grabbing additional perks that require higher stat levels, such as Armorer at Strength 3, Lone Wanderer at Charisma 3, as well as Penetrator and Concentrated Fire at Perception 9 and 10 respectively. I will explain all of this more thoroughly in the leveling and perks section. Starting with 10 agility and 10 luck allows us to absolutely max out our action points and critical potential, especially because once we have the agility and luck bobblehead, we will have 11 in each stat. With 11 agility, our action points will be at a base of 170, and then with Lone Wanderer rank 4, we gain an extra 25, plus if you get the magazine Astoundingly Awesome number 8, you will get another 5 action points permanently, giving us a total of 200 AP at level 50. You could also go for Quick Hands rank 3 for an extra 10 points if you really wanted to, but I didn't think that was necessary. On top of that, if you manage to find a 44 pistol with the VATS enhanced effect, it will reduce the action point cost of your weapon by 25% and add a 33% VATS hit chance, which as you can see allows us to fire a silly amount of shots before running out of action points. I will discuss this in the gear section, but it is also possible to stack even more VATS usage with armor pieces modified with ultra light, adding +5 per piece, and VATS enhanced armor pieces reduce the action point cost by 10% each, but ultimately you are getting to obscene levels of overkill at this point. As for the special book in Sanctuary, we will take this and put a point into Perception. In addition, the Perception bobblehead is really easy to find in Concord, in the same room as Preston Garvey, so that starting Perception of 4 will quickly become 6. We will want to leverage the special points gained from the other bobbleheads as well in order to reach higher stats with less perk point investment, but I'll mention in the leveling when they would be required. Okay, so it's time to jump into the perks. I'm going to take you through leveling at each stage, explaining my choices and presenting how they factor into the build. I've arbitrarily divided this next section into 3 parts: early game levels 1 through 20, mid game levels 20 through 35, and late game levels 35 through 50, though I made it level 51 in this special case. In my experience, this largely encapsulates a Fallout 4 playthrough, however of course you can continue this build and evolve it how you'd like. I will add in some suggestions at the end. Anyways, let's start with the early game leveling. Early game perks are in this order. First up, we'll want to grab Idiot Savant rank 1, which can give us 3 times the XP gain for an action, with a higher chance the lower the intelligence. Considering we only have 1 intelligence, our leveling speed would be drastically hindered without Idiot Savant, and since we are so highly invested in luck, it seems a no-brainer to pick this up. Idiot Savant should proc about 11% of the time you gain XP at 1 intelligence, and we make it our first choice in order to maximize our XP gain over the course of the game. After all, more XP means more levels sooner, which means more perks sooner, so it's a wise idea in my opinion. Remember, there's no perk choice at level 1 when you start the game, so next up is level 3, where we would take Gunslinger rank 1, offering 20% more damage for pistols. Then at level 4 we would take Critical Banker. I like to get this one early on because it gives us an extra critical hit slot so that we can hold on to 1 saved critical for when we need it, while still racking up a separate crit meter while in VATS, rather than a situation where we are getting excess hits in VATS that have already capped out the crit meter and are therefore going to waste. Following this, at level 5, I would take Gun Fu, which makes it so you do 25% more damage to your second target in VATS and beyond. So this is what begins incentivizing the multi-target VATS playstyle, getting us feeling like that Western legend who clears a room in a few seconds. Now we do have a lot of perks to get this early on, which makes us very spoilt for choice, but we have a small base of playstyle enhancements, so I think now is a good time to dip into the quality of life boosts, namely lockpicking. At levels 6 and 7, we get Locksmith rank 1 and rank 2, so that by this point we can open expert locks, and getting this early maximizes the looting opportunities that we have throughout the game. I chose to get this benefit early on, however if you wish to avoid lockpicking altogether, then you could really double down on the combat perks only, but it's up to you if you want to make that choice. At level 8 we go for Gunslinger rank 2, increasing damage with pistols by 40% and offering increased range. At level 9 I grab rank 1 of Bloody Mess. This is purely for flavor, meant to replicate some of the gnarly kills that you may see in Django Unchained, and it nudges our damage up by 5% as well. Level 10 I go for Action Boy rank 1, giving us 25% faster action point refresh, and then at level 11 we take Idiot Savant rank 2, which offers the chance to receive 5 times the XP for an action, further boosting our experience gain over the long term. Okay, so in the first half of the early game, we have built ourselves a strong base, but it's now time to hone in on some of those crit enhancing perks. Levels 12 and 13, we will take 4-Leaf Clover ranks 1 and 2, which makes it so every hit in VATS gives us a chance to instantly refill our critical meter, and considering we have tons of action points and we can rack up lots of hits in VATS, the return on this perk is really good. After this, at levels 14 and 15, we go for Better Criticals ranks 1 and 2, which makes our criticals do twice as much extra damage. And since we are in a position where we get lots of critical hits, thanks to very high luck, critical banker, and 2 ranks of 4-Leaf Clover, we're able to get a ton of value from this perk, and it really helps us when we may be facing a tough enemy or boss, and we can deal with them by just unloading 2 criticals into their face. At level 16, we take Gunslinger rank 3, giving us 60% more damage with pistols and increased firing range. At level 17, we get Critical Banker rank 2, which lets us store an additional critical, meaning that at this point in time, we can stack up to a total of 3 critical hits to use. Critical Banker is simply a vital perk for this build, helping us make the most of our high luck. At level 18, I chose Locksmith 3, so now we can unlock Master Locks. This is the last perk choice that we take that falls in the utility category. Everything else from now on is directly related to our central playstyle. Finishing off the early game levels with 19 and 20, we will be taking Grim Reaper's Sprint ranks 1 and 2 consecutively. This perk gives us a 25% chance to restore all our action points after a kill in VATS, and considering this is where we make 90% of our kills, there is a great return to be had on investment in this perk. So by level 20, the end of the early game stages, we have created a top tier foundation for the Gunslinger. We have high action points with relatively low AP cost weapons, we have 3 slots for criticals thanks to Critical Banker, with about a 10% chance on VATS hits to fill our crit meter thanks to 4-Leaf Clover, and we do a further 100% extra damage on criticals because of the Better Criticals perk. Gun Fu and Grim Reaper's Sprint also boost our VATS capability further, offering more damage on consecutive targets and action point recovery on kills. The Gunslinger build is well underway at this point, but we still got a lot of sauce to add to this guy, so let's move on to the mid-game leveling. Coming into the mid-game at level 21, we are going to be taking Action Boy 2, which takes our action point regeneration from a 25% boost to a 50% boost, which is just great for our AP intensive character build. Next, levels 22 and 23 will be spent boosting our perception stat to a total of 8, considering we used the special book to add 1 point and found the bobblehead early on. Each point of perception boosts our VATS accuracy by about 3 to 4%, but that is not the main reason we are boosting it. We want access to some of the perks later down the stat line. Level 24, we will boost the strength stat by 1, plus we will make sure that we have the strength bobblehead from the mass fusion facility to boost strength in total to 3. The reason for this is so we can gain access to the armor perk at level 25. The purpose of investing in this is so that we can make our rather fragile character a bit sturdier. Now, as we invest in this perk, it will give us several options, which I will expand upon more broadly in the gear section, but ultimately it will allow us to either boost our armor pieces or add ballistic weave to our farmhand clothes, depending on which route you go. Moving on to level 26, we take Gun Fu rank 2, which allows us to do 50% more damage to our third target and beyond, meaning when we target, say, 5 enemies with VATS, the first one would take normal damage, though I recommend opening with a critical on this one, especially if the target is further away with a lower hit chance. The second target will take 25% more damage, and then the third, fourth, and fifth target would take 50% more damage, which makes a big difference difference in your enemy deletion capabilities. Level 27 we take Gunslinger 4, which affords us 80% more damage with pistols plus gives us a chance to disarm opponents, which is cool. At levels 28 and 29 we take ranks 2 and 3 of Armorer, allowing us to pump up our armor rating, offering more survivability as the enemies get harder. Levels 30 and 31 are spent further boosting our perception stat, bringing it to a total of 10, further enhancing our VATS accuracy and giving us access to all the perception perks we want. However, we won't make a move on those just yet because we now, at level 32, have access to 4-leaf clover rank 3. We take this and it boosts our chance to refill our crit meter on VATS hits once again. By this point, we should always have at least a single crit at the beginning of a battle and have certain chances of gaining several during it. At level 33, we drop a point into Charisma, and when combined with the Charisma Bobblehead found in Parsons State Insane Asylum, we should have a stat of 3, unlocking the Lone Wanderer perk, which is our next investment at levels 34 and 35. I spoke about this in the companion section, but the Gunslinger is eventually gonna go solo, with just good old Dogmeat by his side. The benefits of Lone Wanderer both from a gameplay and a thematic perspective are too good to pass up, and the other companions will become less useful in combat as you are now far more proficient yourself. Lone Wanderer rank 3 will give you 100 extra carry weight, and you will just simply take 30% less damage, which is a big buff to survivability. And so that rounds out the mid-game leveling. By the end of it, we are a Lone Ranger, vastly more accurate with our shots and only increasing in our 6 shooting abilities. We can also take more wear and tear thanks to the armor perks and the ballistic weave we can make with it, as well as Lone Wanderer's damage reductions. All the while, we can dish out even more damage with our big iron. Entering the late game at level 36, we are going to tap into the rewards of that perception investment by taking Penetrator rank 1, followed by rank 2 at level 37. This essentially allows us to target enemy body parts in VATS that are obscured by cover and maintain full accuracy, and I think this perk, despite gameplay benefits, just thematically makes for a really cool vibe for a gunslinger. Eyeing structural weaknesses and firing a bullet to eviscerate the raider cowering behind cover. At level 38, we take Action Boy 3, which increases our AP regen to a rate 75% faster, which is a great buff for this build. At level 39, we are actually going to save the perk point and just wait until level 40, where we can unlock 2 perks at once: Lone Wanderer 3 and Better Criticals 3. Lone Wanderer 3 grants us a flat 25% more damage as long as we are without companions, and this is just a fantastic all-round boost, and Better Criticals makes our crits do 2.5 times as much extra damage. Also, if you didn't already know, I will just say that Dogmeat doesn't actually count as a companion, so Lone Wanderer still works with him. These 2 perks at level 40 dramatically increase our damage output. At level 41, we get the first rank of Concentrated Fire, which comes with a nifty effect. Every attack on the same body part gains 10% accuracy, often making the difference between a secured hit or definite miss in VATS, and later ranks only improve this further. But first, at level 42, we get Gunslinger 5, giving us a total 100% damage increase to pistols. We have a much better chance to disarm an opponent, and our hits may even cripple a limb. At level 43, we get Critical Banker 3, giving us a total of 4 critical meters to use, further increasing our potential damage output. And I also need to mention that now with rank 3, banking a critical gives you a chance to bank an additional critical on top for free. Insane! At level 44, we get Concentrated Fire rank 2, taking our accuracy increases from 10% to 15% per hit. At level 45, we get Armorer rank 4, the final rank, further helping us buff up our late game character. At 46, we take Grim Reaper's Sprint 3, which makes any kill in VATS have a 35% chance to restore all action points and refill your crit meter, which is amazing considering that translates to 1 in 3 kills on average, adding a free crit to your current total of 4. At this point, you should be able to be very liberal with your use of criticals, far from a rare commodity saved for special occasions. At level 47, we are going to save the perk point because at level 50, we are going to have a few perk ranks to unlock at once. Level 48, we finish off 4-leaf clover with rank 4, which translates to a 14% chance per VATS hit to instantly fill your critical meter. Basically, 1 in 7 hits in VATS are going to refill your crit meter, and with Grim Reaper's Sprint, 1 in 3 kills in VATS are going to restore your action points and fill a critical meter, and none of this factors into the baseline luck stat of 11, which gives us roughly 22% of our crit meter filled per hit, meaning 5 hits in VATS will fill a crit meter. So translated into reality, essentially, every time you enter VATS and empty your 6-shooter, chances are, if you hit each time, that you will get 2 criticals banked, and a third if 3 of those enemies are killed, thanks to Grim Reaper's Sprint. At level 49, we save a perk point again because as we hit level 50, we've got a few to spend. At level 50, we take Critical Banker 4, Lone Wanderer 4, and Gun Fu 3. Critical Banker 4 gives us yet another critical slot to bank, bringing our total critical capacity to 5, and considering how easy it is for us to stack them up, it is wise to grab this one. Lone Wanderer 4 is simple and straightforward, but effective. It grants us 25 extra action points as long as we are alone, expanding our VATS capabilities. And finally, we have Gun Fu rank 3, which follows on the previous ranks in effects. In VATS, we do 25% more damage to our second target, 50% more damage to our third target, and now, thanks to rank 3, we do an instant critical hit against our fourth target and beyond, which has some very cool applications. Consider that if we have 3 criticals banked, we can enter a large group of enemies, even say something crazy like 10 enemies. We can hit the first 3 targets with VATS criticals that we had stored up, and then every other target selected in the chain is going to be hit with an automatic critical, meaning that we just unleashed 10 critical shots in a single flurry, which, let me remind you, is 100% accuracy and a ton of damage. This is what fully realizes the Gunslinger's potential. I also just wanted to tack on a cheeky level 51 recommendation, and that is Concentrated Fire 3. This makes every VATS attack on the same body part gain 20% accuracy and do 20% more damage. This is immensely helpful if you're unloading into the head of a behemoth or power armored enemy, something tough with a good chunk of HP. Overall, by level 51, the late game Gunslinger build is fully realized with a whole suite of agility and luck perks, as well as a few perception ones, that ultimately translate to a build experience with virtually unlimited criticals and VATS usage, allowing you to step into the identity of a wasteland wanderer with a big iron on his hip. Before we go over the late game special stats, I just wanted to throw out some caveats here and there, explaining why I made certain omissions of certain perks. Quick Hands does offer 35% reduction in reload speed, and arguably it is convenient to take early on, and perhaps you could slot that instead of Locksmith or Bloody Mess if you don't care for them. However, ultimately, you are looking at something like 3 seconds default versus 2-second reload speed with Quick Hands, and there are just so many perks to go after as the Gunslinger with much higher returns. You can also have 2 44 pistols and unload one, and then quick swap to the other if you like for constant output, and also giving more of a Gunslinger vibe with several guns holstered. Quick Hands 2 and 3 also offer very small usage, with the second rank making reloads cost no action points, and rank 3 increases action points by 10. Action point cost for reloading the 44 isn't that high, and we restore AP so fast that it isn't really necessary, and 10 action points is nice, but again, not necessary. However, once past level 51, I just dumped 3 levels into Quick Hands to just throw on some overkill, so Quick Hands is a potential suggestion of what to grab after level 51, but be aware it's mostly for convenience and role-playing flavor, and a much more strategic but rather boring option would be to pump up your endurance stat to 10 or add in Mysterious Stranger and Ricochet for extra VATS potential and crit stacking fun. You may also notice that we didn't take Gun Nut, and ultimately that is because of 2 reasons. Firstly, we wanted to keep intelligence really low so we can maximize the benefit of Idiot Savant, and we had so many stats and perks to boost and grab, and reason 2 is that the 44 pistol is very easy to find mods for, rather than investing 4 perk points into the ability to make our own advanced receiver. As we level, we will find plenty of 44 pistols as loot, or in-store inventories that we can buy, and then swap the parts onto our own revolver, which will be something with a neat legendary effect. However, if taking the Gunslinger further than level 51, and you're looking for more convenience, then Gun Nut can be a good option for your extra perk points, especially if you want to use the Western Revolver from the Nuka World DLC. You will need to invest another skill point in Intelligence and get the Intelligence Bobblehead if you're bringing it up to 3, but to be honest, at this stage I would be less concerned about maximizing Idiot Savant benefits because we have already got all the levels and perks we need for the build. Anyway, those are some ideas about where to go with the build after level 51. Let's move on. The late game special stats for a level 51 Gunslinger build with bobbleheads and the special book taken, as well as several special stat boosts through leveling, should be 3 strength, 10 perception, 2 endurance, 3 charisma, 2 intelligence, 11 agility, and 11 luck. In combination with perks, we have an absolute weapon. The Gunslinger, in my opinion, is the ultimate critical build experience, min-maxed for the purposes of making you feel like the quintessential wasteland cowboy. But I think that is pretty much everything you may want to know stats and perks wise. Let's now get into a similar process explaining the gear. Weapons and gear of course varies as you progress through your playthrough, so this section will try to cover some recommendations and equipment goals, following up to the late game gear which ends up with the fully realized character. For the Gunslinger, the early game is very approachable because some of the earliest weapon types we get are pistols, and while they may not fulfill the 6-shooter big iron on hip vibe, the options are practical. The 10mm pistol and the pipe pistol are likely your options, both with relatively plentiful ammo types. However, it is possible to get your hands on a 44 pistol just near Sanctuary in the early game. I can show you how to do that here. But just bear in mind, we will have very little ammo for the weapon at this time, so it is not yet at the point where we can just use it as our mainstay choice. As for the armor choice, it depends on whether you want to prioritize aesthetics or armor rating. The Vault suit with leather or metal armor pieces is always a fun early game look, but it is quite general. Our original Gunslinger build used the Drifter's outfit, and you still could early on, but the big downside is that in vanilla Fallout 4, it can't be upgraded with Ballistic Weave, so you just have to cop a lot of punishment. However, I found a more rustic alternative that I think fits in nicely with the farm backstory and overall cowboy aesthetic, and that is the farmhand clothes, which can be upgraded with Ballistic Weave once you get to that section of the Railroad questline. As for the iconic hat, you should be able to get the militia hat from the body of a Minuteman out the front of the Museum of Freedom, and you can use other ones if you like, such as the cowboy hat from the Nuka World DLC, but this one is my personal favorite. So the look of the Gunslinger is achievable quite early on in the game. The mid-game gear doesn't really change that much, except that now we will be able to apply the Ballistic Weave to the farmhand clothes as we take the Armorer perk, and provided we have made progress in the main questline, there is a good chance that we have Kellogg's pistol, which is a unique 44 revolver with a special effect that refills your action points upon a critical hit. This is a great pistol to use, and will likely be your best friend for a long time, until you find a 44 pistol with an effect you may prefer, such as the Lucky effect, which makes critical shots do double damage and the crit meter fill 15% faster, or the Quick Draw effect, which reduces action point cost by 25%, or like I managed to get, the VATS enhanced effect, which reduces action point cost by 25% and increases VATS hit chance by 33%. Outside of this main 44 pistol, it might be wise to keep the Deliverer pistol as a backup in case you run out of ammo, but look, a suppressed semi-automatic pistol doesn't exactly scream cowboy, so keep it as a backup only. Late game gear for the Gunslinger is identical to the mid game gear. You should have managed to find or buy 44 revolvers with better mods to swap out and onto your primary pistol, whether that be Kellogg's or a legendary one of your own finding. As you do the Nuka World DLC, you can also find and use that Western Revolver, and it's a cool vibe weapon with more damage. but to be honest, I still love the thick bull barrel of the 44 pistol, and as you can see, it works just fine. Bear in mind, it may become more tempting to switch to the Western Revolver if you find one with an ideal legendary effect, but for the most part, I think sticking to a legendary effect 44, like VATS Enhanced or Kellogg's pistol, is better than a plain Western Revolver. They also use the same ammo type, so it's not really feasible as a backup either, unless you're just using it to avoid the reload. As for the fit, it's farmhand clothes maxed with ballistic weave, a militia hat, and a red bandana. This is the Gunslinger aesthetic, but I mentioned earlier I would go over some possible alternatives if your desire is to wear clothing that can have armor pieces over the top. There are some benefits to doing this, such as the modifications, which could change from custard fitted, making sprint cost less action points, or ultralight build, increasing our action points and reducing the weight of the armor, but the main reason to do this is essentially the potential legendary effects you can find that would greatly enhance this playstyle. VATS Enhanced reduces action point cost by 10%. Sprinters is also a decent choice as it increases movement speed by 10%, allowing us to better position ourselves before entering VATS. But most of all, I think lucky pieces of armor could have the most profound effect on gameplay, tripling down on a critical heavy playstyle. Each piece of gear with the lucky legendary effect increases luck by 2, meaning that if you were to put multiple pieces of lucky armor on, you'd be able to decrease the amount of shots required to fill the critical meter even further. It can get pretty insane, dare I say overkill, and consider also that every single hit in VATS, thanks to 4-leaf clover, has that 14% chance to instantly bank critical. Critical Banker rank 3 gives us a chance to bank an additional critical every time a critical is banked, and let us not forget that Grim Reaper's Sprint gives us 1 in 3 chance to fill a crit meter on a kill. This setup is criticals overkill. In my opinion, it's really cool, but I stuck with the more gunslinger appropriate aesthetic setup because as you have seen during the footage, it still annihilates, but this way you look cool while doing it. Okay, let's wrap up the build with a summary of the playstyle. The Gunslinger is primarily a VATS critical banker build, meaning we have super high agility and luck, giving us heaps of action points and criticals via a selection of amazing perks. Now, you will have to bear in mind that this build is not the tankiest. However, as the game gets more difficult in the mid to late game, we compensate for that with Ballistic Weave and the Lone Wanderer perk, which gives us a good dose of damage reduction. But to be frank, you should be just fine because while this build is a little more fragile, its damage output more than makes up for it. And with all these criticals available, we can functionally be a never miss gunslinger, popping heads left, right, and center, clearing a room with VATS before anyone really has a chance to react. VATS, VATS, VATS. That is the playstyle. It's a playthrough of non-stop movie moments, cinematic kills, and truly magnificent damage output. And for some specific strategic recommendations, I would highly recommend keeping at least 1 critical banked at all times, which should be very easy, especially in later levels, because it is sometimes just a priceless way to open in VATS. And remember, crits always have 100% accuracy, so if you see some far off high up target with a fat man and only a 1% chance to hit him in the head, you can do that with a critical. Your first target, funnily enough, is the one that's going to take the least damage unless you use a critical, because thanks to Gun Fu, your second target takes 25% more damage, your third target 50% more, and every target after that takes an instant critical hit when you have rank 3. So given that fact, you really want to rack up as many different targets in a single VATS selection as you can. As I mentioned before, if you had 3 criticals banked and select 10 targets, you could crit the first 3 targets and then everyone after would be an instant critical. The Gunslinger has amazing ability to dispatch groups and apply some rigorous crowd control via brain deletion. But this guy also has the concentrated fire perk, which at rank 3, where it really shines, allows us to gain 20% more accuracy and 20% more damage on each successive hit on the same body part in VATS, which is invaluable when you just unload a ton of shots at a boss's face, like a Myalurk Queen or Behemoth or some legendary enemy. As the Gunslinger, you will be able to fully sink into a western wasteland of fantasy, able to hit any target anywhere with pinpoint and unparalleled accuracy. You're just a cowboy with a big iron and a smoking barrel. Thank you so much for watching this Fallout 4 build. The Fallout show really invigorated our interest in the series, and having spent some time away, it's nice to come back feeling fresh and nostalgic as ever. We plan on doing more builds, and we would love to hear your desires in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this first of our remastered Fallout 4 builds. Let us know if you're keen for more Fallout content, subscribe, like the video if you really want to help us out. It actually does go a long way. My name is Michael, and I'll be back to nerd out with you again very soon.